Good morning. Happy Saturday. I had to stop and get gas as usual. Watching a young man in the gas station dance his life away. I ain't mad about it. He's enjoying something. I don't know if it's a substance or if he is just happy to be there. However, he was dancing like nobody's business. So how's everybody doing? It is Saturday. It is 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm meant to be at work already, but I had a little bit of a slow time getting started this morning. My go-go juice did not kick in as early as I thought it would, and I got tons to do today, tons. So let's see. Yesterday, I started to do a part 2 evening video to show you guys the salad that I was eating. I did not end up eating all day yesterday until about 6 o'clock, and it was just a really busy day. I wasn't hungry, and I got to thinking about it, and I was like, God, I haven't eaten all day today. So I had that salad that I had from yesterday and got it out, took a couple bites, literally took 6 bites and was done. I was full, and I wasn't gonna force myself to eat it, but I started to make a video, and then I started to hear these noises. Okay, let me start by saying I love it when people stare at me when I'm videoing in the car. I work in a nursing home, okay? Now, that just goes without saying that people have passed away where I work. Many people have passed away. And every once in a while, I will hear something while I'm sitting in my office and no one is in the adjacent room to mine, and there will be drawers opening and closing, and there will be clicks and clacks and bangs and shuffling of paper sounds and just things going on. And a lot of the time I will just say, hey, I'm trying to work in here, and things will kind of settle down. Last night, I was going to take my phone and go into our staff bathroom and weigh myself, because I figured it's time to do some number accountability and to really deep dive into that obsession that I have with numbers. And as I stood up, I was already videoing, and I stood up and I was hearing noises, and I was kind of confused about what I was hearing, because we do have a speech therapist who comes in, and occasionally she comes in after everybody else from therapy has left, because that's how her schedule works, and she will be there later in the evenings, and sometimes I'll hear her out there, but usually she'll let me know in some way. Either she'll come to the door and knock and say, hey, I'm here, or we just happen to pass each other in the hall, and she'll be like, hey, I'm gonna be here till around whatever time. That way, mainly so we don't lock each other out. If I'm leaving and I lock the door and she doesn't have her keys in her pocket, then it makes it hard for her to get back in and get her car keys, right? So I kept hearing something, and I wasn't thinking. I was in the middle of making my video and talking about weighing myself and how much weight I had lost, and really just in that thought. And when I opened my door to go out into the therapy area to get to the staff bathroom where we have a little scale, the lights were on. And typically when, we cannot see. Typically when the therapy department is closed, almost always they will turn off all the lights except one light that ends up, are you gonna move over, dude? It leaves enough of a lighted path for me that I have enough light to get to the main door to leave the gym. The gym lights were on, and I know for a fact that they were off because when the therapist that I was talking to, she was the last one to leave. She turned off the lights at the door. She said, have a great weekend. If you need me, call me. I'll see you on Monday. And she shut and locked the door from the outside, because we do have some patients who get in their wheelchair, they have dementia, they're just looking for something to do, and they end up in the therapy gym. So all the lights were on, and I laughed at myself because when I opened the door, there was this look of shock on my face. So I quickly turned off the video and did a walk around. I always go the back way and come up so that I can see if there's anybody in there, because I have in the past, way past, I've had patients come in there and turn on the lights because they thought they were going to work, and I've had to escort them out of the gym and lock the door. So I had this total look of shock, and I was like, I can't post that, because first of all, the camera was down here, so you were looking straight up my nose, and that's not fun. I mean, my nose ring looked cute in it, but it still wasn't fun. And I walked around, there was nobody in there, but the computer not screensavers, but the screensavers were gone and the computers were up as if someone were working. And so I quickly went through the facility to make sure that a therapist had not come back in, maybe to do an eval. We did get a patient late yesterday, so I was making sure that they had not come back in to do an eval. And there were no therapists in the building. No one else in the building has a key to the therapy department besides the therapist and myself and the maintenance director. And that's only in case there's a fire. He never comes back there. So I was definitely discombobulated. I don't get scared, because I have worked in the healthcare profession for so long that those kind of things are, and if you don't believe in paranormal, and if you don't believe in life after death or whatever, you have a right to your opinion. I know the life that I live, and I know what experiences I have had. And so I thanked whatever was in the gym for turning the lights on and allowing me to see a little better. And then I promptly packed up my stuff and left. Twofold: one, I was extremely tired and extremely angry, and two, one of the employees had injured herself and I needed to do an incident report, and I wasn't going to walk all the way back down to the other side of the building to get my stuff. I just went ahead and grabbed it and left. So I'm interested to see what's gonna transpire today, because that's not things like that happen back in our area all the time. So being a nurse, and prior to that I was a med tech, and prior to that I was a CNA, and I have worked in some older buildings. One of the places that I worked was a state mental hospital, and it was one of the best experiences I've ever had, and a lot of things went on there. I actually tried 2 or 3 years ago, I tried to make a video about one of the experiences that myself and one of my CNAs had. I was a med tech at the time, and I worked the night shift. I wanted to tell the story, and I was at home that day recording myself on my phone, and it was an Android phone. I never had any issues with it, and once I got into the story, the phone started acting up, and I was like, okay, cool, let me do it on my computer, and that'll be easier actually to just upload straight to YouTube from the computer instead of having to convert the files and blah blah blah. My computer wouldn't work. It kept freezing up, and so I left it alone. I didn't think anything about it. I left it alone, and I went to work the next day, which was a Saturday. I was in the office by myself and decided that I was going to try to tell the story again, and the video went perfect. I played it back. There was a couple of times where I was kind of grainy in the photo, and I thought, oh, my phone's older, so maybe my camera's going out. And then I tried to post it to YouTube all day. I kept trying to get it to upload, and I know that it wasn't the Wi-Fi connection. It was nothing other than the video would not upload. I could not get that video posted for anything. So I made another little video and said, hey guys, I was trying to tell you this story, this supernatural, paranormal, ghost story, whatever you want to call it. And apparently the ghost doesn't want me to tell its story because I cannot get this video uploaded. And that video sat on my phone until I ended up getting an iPhone, and I did not transfer it over. I just took the pictures over, not the video. So I'm not sure what that was about, because it's not like it was a bad story. Nothing bad happened. I was just sharing the fact that I do, in fact, believe in paranormal stuff, and I enjoy it. I am obsessed with paranormal and true crime, and just trying to tell the story. So let me try again. Let me see if I can get this story out. So the hospital that I worked at as first a CNA, and then I got my med tech. I don't know if it's a certification. Was it a license? I don't know. I got my med tech. It was years and years ago, and it was in Kentucky. So I was working at this place that used to be, way back, it was a working hospital farm. So they had cattle, they had a dairy production area, they had the main hospital, and they had a laundry service, and they had plots where they grew their own food. They had some sort of a trade there. I don't know if it was sewing, or I can't remember what the actual like industrial trade kind of thing was, like making license plate kind of, like they had something there where they could put people to work. And so this state hospital was one where people who had children that had Down syndrome, because it was so it was such a stigma to have a child who was not quote unquote perfect, and people that were living in poverty could not take care of their children if their children were not going to be beneficial to the family. So back then, when mom and dad had kids and the kids got of a certain age, they were assigned something that was beneficial to the family. A chore, working the field, something, right? So, and if you were lucky, you got to go to school, do your chores before and after school, but at some point you know, if you were lucky, you got to go. So that's what the hospital was originally. And it was for people with mental health problems. So in looking up some of the historical portions of it, because I love doing that. I love looking up the history of a place where there's perceived or known paranormal, right? So I was looking it up, and it was things like a husband would have their wife committed for melancholy if she had PMS, or if she talked back to him, if she was not obedient to him, it would be she would be committed. And men who were drunk and maybe didn't pay their bills would get committed to this place. And there were criminals there who had done both violent and non-violent crimes, and they were committed to this place when they pleaded insanity, or if the courts deemed them not capable of standing trial or not being able to be responsible for the crimes that they had committed. So there was a whole plethora of different people that ended up there. I actually found a census of when it was a very, very young hospital, and there were, of course, there was the staff census, the doctors and nurses and the kitchen staff and the cleaning staff, and they were all kept on there. And some of those staff members, when I cross-referenced it, were actually patients there, and they had given them jobs. And there were children that were there from infancy and up for multiple reasons. Some were because of physical disfigurements when they were born. Some were for mental retardation, Down syndrome, things like that. Some were born at the hospital by patients, from patients. by patients from doctors. So it was absolutely, it was engaging, educational, and just mind-blowing, some of the things that went on at this place. So at one point in time, in one of the back buildings, which now serves as a nursing home for the elderly, most of them who have some sort of disability, they had an actual jailed section for prisoners who came in and were either pleading insanity or were deemed unfit to stand trial because of mental incompetencies. And those people were jailed in that building on one of the upper levels. And when I first started working there, I was told about the jailing area, and they had left the actual bars up there that separated the cells. And it's a little gruesome, but you have to think of a huge square area. Can't do it while I'm driving. Okay, so a square area, right? And on the outer perimeter of when you come up the stairs and you step out into this area, there's a little office, which at that time was like the check-in station, where like you would do staff changes and the guards would come in and get report, and then they would patrol, and they would just walk this area where these jail cells were all the way around. When I worked there, they used those cells for storage. So for medical records and ledgers and things like that. Well, there was one cell that had a lot of historical stuff in it for the history of the building, and I'm not ashamed to say that yes, I did go through it. It wasn't HIPAA, they were all dead. And I was an employee there, so it wouldn't have been HIPAA anyway. But I did go through it and start reading about some of the actual things that went on there. So the jail cells were on the outer perimeter of this floor, and in the middle was this concrete slab. And it had these like big, huge metal rings that looked like they were on, like screwed down into the concrete, like you could not get them out. And they were these big, huge metal rings. So I got curious about the history of that room, and that's where they actually did some of the treatments, we'll call them, where they did shock therapy, hence the big rings, and where they did some procedures where there were some brain things that were done other than shock therapy. Now, in researching all of this, I found out that there was this big chair that used to think of like a dental chair, like a dentist, the chair you sit in when you go to the dentist. It was similar to that, only from the way back, right? And it was in the middle of that concrete slab, and when they would bring the prisoners from the cells to this chair, they would shackle them with their arms out, and the shackles went down to the floor and clipped into these big, huge rings, and then that's where they would receive shock therapy and other treatments to the brain. And they would do it right there in the middle where all these cells, the other prisoners in the cells, could see it. And so that was a very active place. Now, when I was working there, they took that area and they actually built like dummy walls around that concrete slab, and they put washers and dryers in there, and they ran electric from the outer wall up through like used to be a drain where the chair sat. There was a drain, and I'm sure that was for if you voided on yourself, and they could hose it down and get it into this drain. Well, that drain was no longer operable, and so they ran electric, and that way it wasn't, you didn't trip on it and whatever. So they had a washer and dryer. Actually, they had 3 washers, 2 dryers, and then a table. So if you worked at night, you had to do laundry. You did the resident laundry, and you also did the linens and things. So even as a med tech, I was expected to assist with the laundry. Well, I'm not a chicken by any means. Not by any means. I really feel like I have a good grasp on what I'm afraid of and what I'm not. I've never been afraid of paranormal. Demonic, of course. I mean, who wouldn't be? But paranormal, no. That sun's killing me. And I was afraid to go upstairs only because the door to the room that they had built around this slab, it was a very heavy door, and I had went up there by myself one time and the door had shut and I couldn't get the door open easily, and I have a huge fear of being confined, stuck in something. Oh, that will shine. And so after that experience, and there was nothing going on, it was just I couldn't get the door open and I panicked a little. So after that, I would always ask one of the other CNAs to go up with me to do laundry. Well, I had this one CNA that I worked with and we're still friends. We don't get to speak as much because he has left the area, but I asked him to go up and do laundry with me. I needed to put stuff in the washer, get things out of the dryer, and move the washer stuff into the dryer. So it was a full laundry episode happening up there. And I asked him to go with me, and of course he said yes. So we go up to this floor and we go into the laundry room, and so I'm standing in front of the washers, and so the dryers would have been on this side and then the table would have been on the other, like directly behind me. So he was standing over to this area, over to my right, and I'm loading stuff in. I had already unloaded the washers and put it in the dryer, and he was taking into one dryer. He was taking things from the other dryer to put it on the table so that we could fold it. And I'm in front of the washer, and I kept hearing chatter, like I could hear, it was like people talking in a distance, whispery chatter. And I asked him, I said, so-and-so, do you hear somebody talking? Is there somebody else up here? And he said, well, wasn't going to say anything because I didn't know if I was actually hearing it, but I think I'm hearing it, but I'm just going to keep doing laundry. Okay. So we get all of the laundry switched to the places where it needed to be. The washing machines had come on. We were both standing at the table folding clothes, and all of a sudden the lights went out. The door slammed shut. The washers and dryers started making these god-awful noises. So I ran to the door and tried to open it and was beyond panic-stricken because I could not get the door open. So the CNA that I was with, I was like, help me get the door. So he's working on the door, pulling on the door. The door knob was locked. It would not turn, but there was no lock on that knob. They had specifically put like a bedroom no lock knob on there so that there was not a chance of anybody getting shut in there in case one of the patients happened to get up there, which I'm sure that it had happened at one point, so that's why they thought of it. It never happened while I worked there. They didn't go anywhere, because in that hospital, it was like that movie where Nicole Kidman goes, unlocks the door, goes in it, shuts it, locks it, goes to the next door, unlocks it, goes through it. That's exactly how the hospital was. In order to move from area to area, you had to unlock the door that you were entering, and when you shut it, it locked itself after that point, but you had to have a key to open every single door. There was no lock on this knob. And so he was trying it, he couldn't get it to twist, and so I was like, okay, let's calm down. And I literally yelled out, I'm just trying to do laundry. I don't care what you're doing up here. Just let me get the clean clothes out. The washer and dryer stopped making noise. After a few seconds, the lights came back on. I turned my head and looked at him. He's like paper white. I couldn't have been any different. And the door swung open. Ever so slowly. Just creeped its way open. And the lights outside the room also then popped back on. So my heart was beating to a point where I then did not care about them clean clothes on that table. Because not that I was scared, it took me out of my, I wasn't expecting it to be that
lively, that active, that in your face, here we are. And I told him, I said, we'll come up and get that later. Send somebody else. I need to go. He says, no, let's just grab the clothes. And he was very like, I don't know how to describe his demeanor, but he was just very, no, let's just grab the clothes. Okay, so we had, they were small loads. It's household size washer and dryer, right? So we were able to just kind of quickly, wasn't a very good fold job, threw them in the basket, which was like a buggy kind of thing on wheels, like you would see at a commercial laundromat. We step out of that door, which until then we had not touched again, and it was still minimally open. So I took my foot and moved it open, and we kind of both walked out slowly, and all of a sudden, the only thing I could think of was the Andy Griffith show where the drunk is in the jail cell and he's got his metal cup and he's banging it on the bars and it's doing that. That's what we heard when we stepped out into the corridor that originally was the walking area that the deputies would walk around to view the prisoners that were in the cells that were still intact up there. And so I kept looking at the floor. I wasn't even looking around, and I said, we're done now. We'll come back for the rest later. Sorry if we disturbed you. And he put his hand on my shoulder, and as I looked up, one of the cell doors slid open. I couldn't swallow. I said, thank you for letting us know that you're here, and we're going now. Hoping and praying we were going to be able to be going now. And so we get out to the little area. It's hard to explain if you've never been there, but basically the way you get up was you took an elevator. It was like a back service elevator, and it opened up into almost what you would consider like a lobby. Like it was just a blank open little area. And then after you walked through that, you opened the door into the area that was the old jail area. So we get back to that little lobby area, and I turn around and look at him, and he is just still so pale. And he looked at me, and he kind of got this little like grin, and he said, he kind of stood there for a minute, and then he took a deep breath, and he said, I never believed it until just then. And as he said that, from inside where the jail cells were, we heard that that cell door slam shut. And I said, well, I think that's probably why they just did that. Whoever's up there, whoever is back there, that's probably why they just went to that extreme to show you that they are in fact up there, because they knew that you were maybe on the cusp of believing. But I was like, thanks a lot, so-and-so. That was your fault that all that just happened. And we laughed it off, and we went downstairs, and there were many, many other things that happened at that place, and the stories that I could tell, and maybe I'll tell some more in another video and share some of the experiences that were there. One of the first nights that I worked out there, I was assigned to the men's unit, and there was a patient there who had been convicted of murder and child molestation and kidnapping. And he was convicted at a time where when you were convicted, they either sent you to a work prison or they sent you to a mental institution, depending on how your trial went. And he was assigned to the state mental hospital for the rest of his life. And he was actually passing, I think it wasn't the very first night, because the very first night I was actually working. It was just being toured everywhere, showing me where my keys worked and fit and whatever, and how to find, the supplies I needed. And then I was kind of shadowing somebody. But
and being taught how to use the hand lift and how to work the hand beds, because back then we were not fancy. We didn't have all the mechanical stuff with the buttons that you push to position your people, or the buttons to lift with a Hoyer lift. It was all hand crank. It was like well water kind of pumping to get people lifted up. Which I was probably in the best shape of my life when I worked there, because everything was hand done. There was nothing that was electric as far as patient care stuff, with the exception of the lift that put them into the tub. That did have an electric component to it. But it was within the first week of me working there, and this patient was passing away, and I went into his room, and one of the older nurses, who she had been a nun for a lot of years, and for whatever reason decided to become a nurse and had left the nunnery. I think that's what you call it, the convent, whatever. I don't know that she lived in a convent, but she was a nun, and she was no longer a nun. She was a nurse. She was still very deep in her beliefs, and she went over to this gentleman's window and she opened it, and she knelt down beside his bed and she started to pray, and she was praying for his soul and praying for him to admit his sins and to accept Christ. And there was me, her, another nurse, and another CNA in the room, and all of a sudden you could hear this whistling, and it was I guess the only way to describe it would be it was an eerie whistling. It wasn't like somebody, whistling zippity-doo-dah-day. It was this eerie whistling, and it was very faint. And I looked at the nurse that was standing next to me, and I had never heard of it, and they looked at me like I was an idiot. And I said, why did she just open his window? It's not like he's passed away and he's going to smell. And the nurse looked at me and she said, oh, you haven't heard of opening a window when somebody passes? And I said, no, why would you do that? And she said, so their soul doesn't get trapped in here. And the CNA turned around and looked at me and she said, we have enough souls trapped in here. His needs to go. And I remember feeling very heavy at that moment. My chest was tight, and I didn't know if it was, I had seen plenty of people passing. The first person that I'd ever taken care of as a CNA, I literally held her hand while she passed and sang to her and read scripture to her. But all of a sudden I was heavy and my chest was tight, and he took his last breath and the window slammed shut. And when the window slammed shut, I actually had bowed my head and was praying that whatever sins he committed, that he ultimately could purge his sin, and that he would admit his guilt, and that God could find favor on him. And I was lost in my own little prayer. And when I looked up, the room was cloudy, almost like, when you're driving to work in the early morning and you have just that light misty fog. It wasn't that dense, but the room was hazy. And I thought, well, it's the middle of the night, maybe like rubbing my eyes and looking around. And the nurse that used to be a nun looked up at me and she said, pray for him to go. And I'm sorry, what? She looked at me and she opened the window again, and she had her hand on the window and was like this, so it couldn't slam down again. Which still amazes me that they had windows in there, because I guess they couldn't have got far. But she had her hand kind of supporting the window so it couldn't slam, and in the most sovereign tone that I've ever heard anybody directly speak to me, she said, pray for him to go. And I remember looking around the room, and we all kind of bowed our heads really quick. And so when you get told to pray by a nun, whether she's an active nun, ex-nun, I think one day I'm gonna be if a nun tells you to pray, you just do it. It's like your mom telling you to put your hands in your lap. You just, okay, you don't think about it. It's just something that's done. And I remember saying, Lord, whatever's happening right now, please let him go and be at peace. You be at peace with him. Whatever has to happen, Lord, that's all your business right there. Let me only mind mine right now, please. Let me just have all my business and none of that. And the nurse that was standing next to the door, she had hit this little button that alerted everybody that we had had a passing, an expected passing. And she opened his room door and we stepped out into the hall. And as we stepped out, it was almost like this gust. It was almost like an actual gust came out behind us, as if it were pushing us out into the hall. And nobody spoke. Nobody said a word. Nobody said, oh my God, did you feel that? Nobody said a word. I remember I looked at the faces because I read people's reactions mainly by their face and their body language and how they're standing and holding themselves. And I'm standing there trying not to quiver because I don't fully understand what happened with him. At that point, I didn't know all the deets about him. I didn't have all the tea, all the sugar, and all the honey. I didn't know exactly what was going on there until a little bit later. Somebody took my parking space again. I'm gonna have to put a little plaque up that says, this belongs to Nicole, don't park here. So there are tons of stories that I have that are maybe not that intense. I mean, some are just, papers blowing when you're in the middle, like actual center of a building. There's no window, no fan, no air conditioning, because some of the areas around there still did not have air conditioning. But yeah, so maybe I'll share some more of those. Now, the fun part is going to be, I'm going to go into my office right now, and I'm going to try to upload this video. And if it will not upload, that's going to be 100% my sign that I'm supposed to hush about what happened when I worked at the state mental hospital. We'll see. Peace and palm love.